Right, we are joined by Yael Aronoff, a Serling Chair in Israel Studies and Professor of International Relations at Michigan State University. The professor just heard there domestic heat for Mr. Biden rising over the war from, well, all sides, within Democratic Party, from the GOP, from voters. How big a political collateral damage would this war inflict on him if the conflict is to continue?
Yeah, one of Hamas's motives for its massacres of over 900 civilians and then another foreign people in Israel on October 7th was to disrupt the Israeli-Saudi normalization, which would be contrary to their interest as they oppose a two-state solution and have spoiled efforts in the past to do so. So they oppose a Palestinian state in part of the land rather than all of the land. And so Iran which backs Hamas and Islamic Jihad with aid and training and weapons and financial assistance in coordination with Hezbollah in Lebanon, all oppose kind of the Saudi-Israeli normalization that was in progress, that was also hopefully going to have progress with the Palestinian Authority towards a two-state solution. So when you look at aid towards Israel, it's in the context of also the U.S. Trying to balance Iran's influence in the region and Iran's efforts through its proxies who want to destroy Israel. So it's trying to prevent and deter Hezbollah with its 120 and 170,000 rockets to enter the war, for Iran to enter the war in collaboration with Hamas's continued rockets. So I think that is the overarching kind of agenda that Biden has in terms of backing Israel in the face of Iran supporting Hezbollah's efforts and Hamas and Islamic Jihad's efforts.
And continuing that, the U.S. has rejected calls for a ceasefire. They're saying it's not the right answer right now. Some observers are saying it's in Washington's interest to let the war play out. What are your thoughts?
I'm not so sure that the United States is against a ceasefire. I mean, that's up to the parties involved. And so one of those parties is, of course, is Hamas. It's released only, 3 hostages or so. It's keeping over up to 230 more. So if it's released the hostages, and if it stopped firing rockets continually and indiscriminately at Israeli civilian areas and so forth, and if it didn't kind of store its weapons and fire its rockets from civilian areas and use them as human shields. So, of course, we could have a ceasefire immediately if Hamas was pressured to do so. We could also have one if Israel decided. Now, we don't know if Israel started a ceasefire, whether Hamas would comply with a ceasefire, but certainly that could be seriously entertained as a way to negotiate the release of hostages and avert kind of the heavy costs of trying to go after Hamas in civilian areas. So Hamas has created a situation through its massacres of hundreds of people on October 7th. It knew Israel was going to respond in this heavy way, and it intentionally has immersed itself among civilians so that civilians would be killed if Israel responded. I myself think that even though Israel has a complete right to self-defense, and it's completely understandable that it would want to topple Hamas, that the costs are just too high in terms of Palestinian civilians, in terms of Israeli soldiers that are going to be involved, and the outcome of whether Hamas can be toppled, who would take over, is unclear. So I think there can be room for looking at ceasefires. I don't think the United States is the main country blocking that. I think Hamas is the main person who's preventing a ceasefire, the main body and group.
Professor, so is there any possibility of a ceasefire or a pause on the horizon, or as Prime Minister Netanyahu said, do you expect to see continued assaults by Israel to achieve its objectives in the Gaza Strip?
Yeah, I hope that there will be space for ceasefires to negotiate the release of hostages. Of course, it's ridiculous that there has to be negotiated. It should be that the world is pressing Hamas and the region is pressing Hamas to release them unconditionally. These are all war crimes, and just they have babies, children, Holocaust survivors that they've taken hostage. They should be immediately released. So it's kind of extremely upsetting that one would even have to negotiate the release of babies and children and Holocaust survivors. But if that's the case and that's the reality, then yes, there should be ceasefires to do that, to avoid further casualties, and to try to get towards what most Israelis and Palestinians want, which is peace and movement towards a two-state solution in which there would be a Palestinian state alongside Israel. There have been several Israeli governments in the past that have offered that have offered the vast majority of the West Bank, all of the Gaza Strip, a quarter between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, most of East Jerusalem to a Palestinian state. They offered that in 2000, 2001, 2008 for a variety of reasons, perhaps because the Palestinian Authority wanted an even better deal. Those were rejected. But a major reason why there's no Palestinian state today alongside Israel is Hamas, because during those times, during the Oslo process in the 90s and thereafter, Hamas intentionally upped its suicide bombings in Israel, attacks on civilians, terrorist attacks, because they're against a two-state solution that the Palestinian Authority is for, and they want to destroy Israel. So I'm hoping that the international community and the regional community can support and provide incentives and other kinds of things for Israel and the Palestinian Authority to be able to move ahead, to carve that out, and so that Hamas could be weakened or moderated. But up to now, it's been a huge spoiler to a Palestinian state alongside Israel. And that's a real concern and obstacle that needs to be overcome to make more progress to provide that peace and freedom and independence and self-determination for both Israelis and Palestinians.
All right, Professor, we'll have to leave it there for now, but thank you very much for your insight this morning. Yael Aronoff, Serling Chair in Israel Studies and Professor of International Relations at Michigan State University.